Welcome everybody, it's David here. By now you've been enjoying, I'm sure, the courses from Barbara and Pete, my two colleagues. What I'm going to do now is spend a little bit of time just introducing to you the third module and also giving a little bit of a personal introduction. So my name is David Bell, I'm the Jinmei Zhang Yongei Dai Professor here at the Wharton School. I arrived at the Wharton School right about the time of Internet 1.0, when people were first getting into things like Webvan and Pets.com and all those companies that ended up going bust. Over the last 10 to 12 years, I've been studying mainly the internet, teaching the marketing core here at the Wharton School, and also teaching a new class on digital marketing and electronic commerce. That's mainly where my research interests lie. So without further ado, let me just introduce what it is that we're going to do over the next little bit. We have three parts to the third module. The third module, of course, is all about execution and go-to-market strategies. So the first piece is going to be about omni-channel strategy and online-offline interaction. So what happens when you can access customers both in the real world and also in the virtual world. The second piece of the module is going to be how to find lead users and how to facilitate influence and contagion, getting that word of mouth and buzz going about your product. And then the third piece is going to be about targeting and messaging, pricing to value, access to customers, and also distribution issues. As we go along, I'm going to be providing a number of examples. Of course, our key case, which is Quidsy.com, that's the family of brands, soap.com, diapers.com, and so on. And also at the end of each module or thereabouts, I'm going to give you some food for thought questions to think about that we can then discuss through the message board. So, what are we going to do in this particular session, the introductory session to the third part of the module? First of all, I'm going to give a short recap of some of the key ideas that Barbara and Pete have talked about around branding and around customers. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in each of those as they relate to execution. So first of all, thinking about brand assets. Second, thinking about customer assets. And then thirdly, and historically controversially, thinking about marketing spend itself also as an asset. So if you look at an income statement of a traditional company, you'll have top-line sales from which you then subtract things like marketing. And a simplistic view of the world might say, well, if I eliminated all of the spending that I'm doing on marketing, my profitability would increase. But of course, as we all know from Barbara and Pete and also what we're going to do together as well, that's just not true. If we cut marketing, then of course sales and other things fall. So that's going to be our plan for the day. So let me start with a little bit of a recap of some of the things that you've looked at with Pete and Barbara and just go back to some of those key acronyms. So first of all, the three key marketing acronyms that you've already seen are the 5 C's. Okay? I like to think of those C's as constraints. It's another nice word that starts with C. So we have customers, we need to understand their needs. We have competitors that Barbara talked about. We need to understand our point of differentiation and point of advantage over competitors. Thirdly, we need to think about our own company. What internal resources do we have in terms of our existing customers, our brand strength, and so on. Fourth, we need to think about collaborators. These are partners that we may need to facilitate our access to market. And then finally, this idea of context. And the context is all of those things going on in the macro environment, such as aging populations, new innovations in technology, more concern about the environment, and so on. So those are the 5 C's. With Barbara and Pete, Barbara in particular, you've also talked about the 4 P's. I think of P's as parameters. Parameters are things that you can change and manipulate as a marketing person or a marketing executive. They are the product, the price, the promotion, and the place. And that's where really you and I are going to be spending most of our time together. And then finally, of course, the other acronym is STP, segmentation, targeting, positioning. So your segmentation, targeting, and positioning strategy provides the link between the environment, the 5 C's, and the parameters, the 4 P's that you implement. That's how those things come together. Okay, so a little bit of an asterisk beside product. I know there are only 4 P's, but I would argue these days product is probably becoming somewhat almost more important than the other 3, or certainly the thing that you should think about first. And that's because it's never been easier to get into developing a new business, whether it's a business around content and information or a business around physical goods and services. So if you're thinking about product, you should try to make sure that the product has the potential to deliver exceptional value. If you're lucky, secondly, it should be a product that could address a large market. And thirdly, it should also be a product that's very, very easy to explain and describe. So as we now have about 1 billion people around the world holding on to computers in their pockets, things like this little iPhone here, That means that if I come across some interesting new product or service and I want to tell you about it, I might be able to actually show you in the phone itself. So it should be a product that's easy to explain and describe. And then finally, it should hopefully be a product that doesn't cost much to test it and to scale. So even though the 4 Ps are all equal in some respects, I'd like you to start thinking about product first with respect to those 4 conditions. So to get us started thinking about execution, I'd like all of us to focus on what I consider to be the key question when it comes to developing new business ideas and thinking about how to execute them. The question's a very simple one, and the question is just, what is wrong with the status quo? So as you're going about your daily life, buying groceries, ordering taxis, booking hotels, interacting with your friends and family, I'd like you to think about what could be improved about all of those experiences that we go through. Indeed, what is wrong with the status quo way of doing things? And let me illustrate this with a famous brand and example that we all know and perhaps many of us love. That brand is Starbucks. And several years ago, Mr. Howard Schultz, in founding Starbucks, noticed that in the United States, people were drinking coffee, quite a lot of coffee. Most of it, however, was not very good coffee. It was coffee they were buying in the supermarket, coffee that they were consuming at home, or maybe picking up from gas stations. In short, it was just simply a product without much peripheral experience or service to go with it. Then he went to Europe, and he noticed in Europe people also drank coffee, but when they drank coffee, they did so with their friends. They drank higher ends of coffee. They knew about things like macchiatos and lattes and so on. So it was really a completely different experience. It was the core product with all of these other things wrapped around it. And so when he came back to the United States and started Starbucks, in his mind he had the notion of Starbucks being something what he refers to, or Starbucks refers to, as the third place. So the first place is your home. Most of us in our home life is getting probably a little bit more stressful and difficult than it used to be perhaps 50 years ago. The second place is our workplace. That's certainly more difficult and more stressful. We're all working a lot harder. And the idea of Starbucks is the third place. That's where you can go and all of your troubles float away on a steamy latte. So this is a really great example of someone who saw what was wrong with the status quo and then he went about and improved upon it. So that's the starting point for thinking about execution. In addition to that, within the notion of the C of context, contextual change, I want to just share with you 4 changes that we should have in the back of our mind when we think about execution that are really affecting the way new businesses are coming about and new businesses are growing. So the first big contextual trend that's pretty hard to stop, and it's one that we could leverage, is what I call democratization and access. What do I mean by that? I mean that technology, through scale and low cost, has allowed people to get access to things that they never before were able to do. A great example of that would in fact be our course together on Coursera. So we have about 100,000 of us all participating, all interacting, because of technology giving us the scale and ability to do so. So previously, if you wanted to come to the Wharton School, you'd have to physically be in Philadelphia for a class. So that's a big trend, and Coursera is but one example. I'd like you to try and think about some more. Second big trend that's occurring, again partly because of the internet, is this idea of what I call value chain disruption. And what I mean by that is there are many markets for eyewear, markets for shaving, markets for furniture, markets for bedding, where the price that's paid by the end consumer is very, very high relative to the cost. Perhaps some monopoly has that market locked up, perhaps there's some kind of structural impediments that mean consumers are really getting a bit of a raw deal. So one example of this is the company, again listed on the slide, Harry's.com. So Harry's is a company that ships for guys like me, razors, cream, and shaving foam directly to my home. And Harry's is built on the notion that there are some competitors out there that offer a very good shave, but at an extremely high price, perhaps companies like Gillette. So Gillette maybe respects your face, gives you a nice shave, but doesn't really respect your wallet. You pay in the US maybe $4 to $5 for a shaving cartridge. On the other hand, there might be companies like Dollar Shave Club. I encourage you to look at the video. It's very entertaining if you go to that website, Dollar Shave Club, where the blade cost is much, much lower, but perhaps the quality of the blade is not quite as good. And then we have Harry's in the middle, where Harry's is both respecting your wallet, the product's not that expensive, it's only about $2, but also respecting your face by giving you a good shave. So that's the second trend. The value chain for many businesses is being disrupted. The third trend, another sort of unstoppable one, I believe, is what I'll call collaborative consumption. And what I mean by that is in many, many product categories, let's start with automobiles, there's an oversupply of product. So if you own a car like I do, it's probably the case that your car is inactive about 23 hours a day. So that seems like a real waste of that resource. You're only using the car maybe 7 to 10 hours a week out of a total of 164 hours that you could be using it. And so wouldn't it be more efficient if perhaps there was just one car or two cars per apartment building and there was some efficient way of sharing those things? This is the idea behind a company like Zipcar, which is here in Philadelphia and many other places around the world under different names, or the bicycle sharing that you see in Paris and New York City and other places. So the idea that we could share assets and consume them collaboratively. And then the fourth trend, which again is one I believe that's facilitated a lot by the use of technology, particularly mobile technology, is the matching of supply and demand. So think about going out at night with a group of friends and trying to find a taxi cab, particularly if you're off the main area of whatever city it is that you're in, can be very, very difficult. However, it turns out that in many cities there are limousine drivers or black car drivers who are sitting out there with actually no one to drive. And so if there was some way of matching that supply and demand, then you could create a ride for someone like me who needs to get home and create some money for somebody like the driver who would like to benefit from that excess demand. So a company that really shows that is a company called Uber, uber.com. It's also on the slide. So those are the four key trends that I'd like you to think about in terms of being able to execute on new businesses in innovative kind of ways. Okay, next thing I want to introduce here is a framework for execution that really ties back to the things that Pete and Barbara have also been talking about. And this is something I call Marketing Math 101. It's kind of a simple idea. The only math that's in there is actually a multiplication sign, so don't be too concerned that it's going to be overly technical. And Marketing Math 101 says the following. It says that your success in a market is equal to how good the product or service is interacted or multiplied by how good the marketing is. So let me explain those components. First of all, let's start with the product. So the product or service that you're offering, imagine it could be rated on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 means the product is really, really lousy, and 10 means that the product is absolutely fantastic. Okay? Marketing means two things. First of all, marketing means the fit to the customer and the brand through segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And then the other three Ps, the price, the promotion, and also the place or the distribution strategy. So imagine you have the greatest product in the world. It's a 10 out of 10 product or service, but you've done lousy pricing, horrible promotion, and you've used completely the wrong distribution strategy such that your marketing effort is really worth a 0. Well, 10 times 0 is 0. Having a great product won't take you all the way. Similarly, if you were just a marketing genius, you had exactly the right price, chasing exactly the right people, with exactly the right promotional message and exactly the right place, but you know what? Your product was lousy. And the word about that got out pretty quickly. You were 10 out of 10 on marketing, but you were 0 out of 10 on product or service. 10 times 0 is also 0, okay? So it shows two very interesting things here, guys. Number one, that you have to be good at both. It's a multiplicative relationship. The product or service has to be great, and so does the marketing. And if both of them are great, you'll have this exponential success. Secondly, and I think more subtly, sometimes if you're failing, your first instinct might be, gee, what's wrong with my product? What's wrong with my service? That might in fact be the wrong instinct. It could be that your product or service is just fine, but you haven't targeted it to the right customers, you haven't used the right promotional message, you haven't set the right price, and so on. So this is a way to think about success or failure as a function of two very simple components, the marketing execution and also the product execution.